Hello, my dotlings, and welcome to another Shameless Self Promotion right here in Madame Tortuga's Lounge with Dottie the Psychic as your host. Don't forget that you can also check out more of the story on Patreon, where the patrons go to support me, Dottie. You can also check out my website, dottiethePsychic.com. With that being said, let's meet this Shameless Self Promotion's guest. Hello, my dotlings, and welcome to another episode of Shameless Self Promotion, right here on Madame Tortuga's Lounge. And today we have, I pointed in the right direction.
You did. Hi, I am the lady, Ms. Vagina Jenkins. I am a Hoodoo-Centered astrologer and artist based in Oakland, California. Pronouns they, them, because I wouldn't be a Californian without my pronouns. And I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for, just seeking out people to be in community with. That feels really beautiful, and I admire you for it. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Oh, I forgot to, we had done like a little bit of an interview to talk about the topics. I didn't think to ask you about talking about your name.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely down to talk a little bit about my name. I have a video on my YouTube page here where I talk about my name. But yeah, so my name, like I said, is the lady, Ms. MS. Vagina Jenkins. I named myself, of course, because we get to do that in this world. We get to choose what we look like, how we be, what we do, who we're in community with, and what we call ourselves. And so, yeah, I named myself after a performance artist named Vaginal Davis. They are originally from Los Angeles, and they're really big in the queer activist communities in Los Angeles and in New York, but they now live in Berlin and work as a film curator. But anyway, when I named myself after them, it's because they were an amazing performance artist that was just doing really cool, weird activist art. And I wanted to aspire to that level of like being your own person and doing your own thing. So I'm named after them, and they named themselves after Angela Davis, another California Black activist. And so I really like my name because I definitely see myself as part of a lineage of like Black queer activism. So yeah, that's the vagina part. And then yeah, the Ms. part is named after the work of Black feminist Dorothy Pittman Hughes. She worked on Ms. magazine with Gloria Steinem back in the 70s, 80s. And yeah, there are so many other aspects of my name, like the lady part that are named after drag queens and gender fuck performers. And yeah, my name it has a deep significance to me because it's very much like me being the embodiment of queer history. So yeah, that's my name. Don't wear it out.
I love that. People don't realize, I mean, I think people who do this do realize, but I don't know that the audience necessarily understands the amount of power you weave into picking a name as a public facing person, even on a small level, even a business name or something like.
Yeah.
I've got a whole backstory on Dottie the Psychic too.
So Dottie the Psychic, tell me the story of your name.
Okay, so my name started out, it's just, Dottie is short for Dorothy. My name is actually Dorothy, which is after my grandmother, but she always pronounced it Dorothy, like the Wizard of Oz, which I always thought was great because now I can tell people are like, are you going to be my friend? Are you a friend of Dottie? Like I'm the next generation.
Cute.
But the psychic bit partially I picked psychic because it's not as scary as witch. And I'm like, I always thought that was more of a personal practice thing. Like, that's not something you announce to people. Like, honestly, if you're into some sort of divination, you usually got a little ass to back it with, It's just kind of what people think. But so my alcoholic ex-husband would drag me off to the bar on my day off, which I worked like night shift, a big chunk of my nursing career. And so I'd be the only sober one at the bar. So I started drawing my deck, which I've actually, I'm really proud of. I've talked about it a lot on the show, but so I started drawing that deck, and I was like, I didn't want to talk to these people. I didn't want to deal with them. So then they'd sit down and try and have a conversation. Like, have you ever had your fortune read? So I started to get a reputation. So people would come up to me and say, "Are you the psychic?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm Dottie.
Dottie the Psychic.
The psychic."
Yeah.
I'm like, remember my name.
Nice.
Like, I have one.
Yes. Yeah. I think that there's so much for anybody that goes into naming. And I don't think that people really realize the power that it has. Like, yeah, from like the spiritual perspective, there's like the numerology of one's name. There's also like the ancestry of one's name, like you being named after your grandmother. Like, if your grandmother was not a good person, would you still want to be named after her? And what our parents intend for us based on the names that they gave us. And do you agree with what your parents intended for you? Like that's part of like how one might rename themselves as well, like renewing my intentions or steering my intentions in a different way. Yeah. Naming is super powerful.
Too. That gave me stuff to think about tonight. Like, what were, you think about it, like when you're naming your kid, at least in that moment, you would hope that they are trying to do their best for you. They're often very flawed in their personal ambitions for you, but in that moment, they are trying to give you the most advantage that they can.
Yeah. Yeah. And then do you agree with like the advantage that they wanted for you, or do you choose something different, or do you double down? Yeah. Naming is interesting. Oh,
I knew a guy who actually gave all his children the option of changing their name when they turned 12. I was like, that's unique.
Did any of them take it?
Huh?
Did any of them take
it? They stuck with their names. I think they all ended up sticking with their names.
You know what's interesting about that 12? I didn't think about it until just that second when you were like, oh, 12 is a big year. 12 is a big year astrologically. So in a natal chart, there's 12 houses, right? Each of these houses is a different area of life. The first house is your identity, who you are. And then you go, that's your 0 to 1, right? And then you keep going throughout that cycle. When you turn 12, you're hitting that first house again. You're back in your first house, what they call a profection year. And so how significant is it that at 12, he gave them the opportunity to reconsider their identity, whether they took him up on it or not? That's kind of a big deal. That dude was an astrologer, whether he knows it or them kids know it. He's an astrologer. Yes.
I tell you what, like it's one of those things about the mountain that we've all got a weird tuning in with our own, I think everybody has, to some extent, because it is such a quiet but pervasive part of our lives that we do as a society develop around it. Because my dad actually, he got my ears pierced and gave me a shotgun for my 12th birthday. That's a proper Appalachian raising right there. I still got the shotgun and the ear piercing, so.
Yeah. It's something to think about anyway.
Yeah. Well, also, because you think about it, like a lot of times when people who are psychic, A lot of people who get into spiritual work, that's that to about what, like 16, usually in that 4-year period is when they really start to pick up an interest.
Oh, you mean like specialize?
Well, not even just necessarily, well, yeah, a little bit. They do tend to specialize, but also to actually actively work towards their spiritual gifts. Like before that, it's usually like, before 12, it's like, oh, I saw this thing or I heard this thing. I've seen ghosts since I was a kid. But it's like that pocket in that early teen years where people seem to get more involved to begin to explore their actual spirituality.
I could see it. Yeah, I feel like that I was a much more spiritual kid. And then when I got to that type of age range is when I decided to put it on the back burner, which makes me sad, but it'd be like that sometimes. Yeah. Anywho, but I'm back on my shit now.
It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up, right?
Facts.
It'd be nice not to fall on my face for a little while, but it just happens. Okay, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about I had never really heard, it makes sense, but I'd never really heard of the perfection years. I know that you've been doing a series on perfection years on your YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about what perfection years are, and then maybe a little bit about your YouTube channel and how that all became, how that evolved.
Oh, sure. I guess I'll just do a brief thing about perfection years. Yeah, it was like my last 3 or 4 videos. And yeah, like I was talking about, it's, these 12 houses in the chart. And that every year on your birthday, you shift to a new profection year. And it's basically a year that you get to focus on that particular area of the chart, that particular area of life. So like first house would be your identity, renewing one's identity, maybe even changing your appearance because you want to present in a different kind of way. Other examples might be the exact opposite of it, a 7th house profection year where you're like more interested in relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but all kinds of one-on-one connections. Maybe you meet a new best friend or you have this new work spouse kind of thing. But yeah, it's like, yes, we're shifting to all of the different areas, and depending on how your particular chart is laid out, that year is going to be ruled by a different type of planet. So do you know what your rising sign is? I forget.
I have no idea, because this is one of those things. I have a love for astrology. I have an absolute adoration for astrologists, like the people who actually want to break that down. But astrology hits me right in the ADHD.
It's a lot of information, and sometimes people don't know what string of information to follow, and right. How do I hold all of this data to make a big giant picture? But yeah, just I'll go with the example of my chart. I'm a Sagittarius rising. And so if I was in a first house perfection year as a Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius on my first house, then that would mean my year was ruled by Jupiter. And so I might anticipate the expansion of something, possibly the expansion of something related to my identity. So maybe I would become famous in my particular industry because I would be expanding my self-expression, right? Or maybe I might gain some weight because I literally would be expanding my body. So yeah, those are some things that you might think about for a first house year that was ruled by Jupiter, which is in charge of Sagittarius. So yeah, that's the idea behind perfection years. But more generally, my YouTube page, I've only been doing astrology on my YouTube page for like the last maybe 6-8 months. But I have had a YouTube account for 12 years. And that is so frustrating. I was an early YouTube adopter, but
The
I never thought
algorithm
that.
just doesn't care.
Oh, well, no, I feel like it's my own thing. Like, I never thought of myself as someone who could have a voice in that way on YouTube. Like, I joined early, but I just thought, oh, I would be consuming content, not necessarily creating content. And it's
Right.
only until very recently that I was like, oh, this is actually a platform that I can share myself and that I can be seen, and I can be seen in this way. I guess I just did not have a vision for myself being seen in this way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of hard though. Like, I mean, really, see, I came at it the other way because honestly, I was just a watcher for a long time, but I was like, I could take a whole new spin on this. I'm watching all these. I've got my own opinions about all these things that I would like to get out there because I kind of used because I had no voice. I was slowly learning that I did have a voice because things were getting so frustrated that I was forced to speak. So once I had been forced to speak, I didn't shut up. I'm like, it is going to be real hard to shut me up now. Like, I was meek, I was quiet until bam. And then once the event that I've talked about it a lot on my channel, I had a pretty severe psychiatric event, we'll call it, in like 2016. And pretty much until that point, I was just kind of surviving on stress. And then after that point, I'm like, I am not doing this anymore. I'm going to try a whole new thing now. And that's kind of like when this whole thing got kicked off. I forgot where I was going.
Oh, I mean, I feel like you were right on target. We were just talking about how people come to presenting themselves on YouTube. And so, yeah, this way of either you start as a watcher and you think, oh, maybe I could present myself. That's me. And then I feel like with you were telling the story of having a significant event that made you speak up and keep speaking up.
Right.
Yeah.
I had an epiphany about my self-worth. Like, it was one of those very dark moments where I felt like I had no worth. And then I come out of it, I'm like, okay, because they say never to compare yourself to other people. I'm like, I'm going to start comparing myself to other people. Look, I know I'm middle class. I don't need to be better than everybody, but I am way above these people down here. And I got to remember that I am not the worst person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
that you deserve to have a voice. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I feel that. Yeah.
I do think that, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, since I've been making YouTube videos, it's just been I guess similarly, it's just been an experiment in like speaking up. I feel like in most of my life, I was seen and not heard. Like, they tell kids to be seen and not heard, and it just stuck with me. And so to actually be heard now feels like a gift. Well, I don't know if people are hearing me, but I'm talking. So
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm screaming into the void, but it still feels good.
And then, the idea that these are things what I am sharing on YouTube is what I am doing anyway. They are my special interests. And so, I definitely like the idea that I get to do whatever I want to do. And if my YouTube monetization actually ends up paying off, that I might actually be compensated for what I was doing anyway. So,
hoping, girl. Here's hoping.
Crossing fingers, knocking on the woods. Yeah.
Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit on one of the things I know we had put on the list was kind of that walking us through your evolution of your astral. You know what? That is not what I meant to say at all. My audience is used to this. It's part of the entertainment at this point. Some people suffer from madness. I've learned to enjoy mine. So tell us a little bit more about like the evolution of your astrology journey, because I know that you are now. Do you offer services? Like, do you do charts for people?
Yeah, I do astrology readings. I have like 7 or 8 different types of astrology readings that I do for folks. Check me out at vaginajenkins.com. So yeah, I definitely do astrology readings for folks. I feel like this has been a recent thing since I say like maybe in the last 3 or 4 years that I do it professionally. And yeah, before that, I definitely had a deep interest. I'm an autistic person, and so I have a couple of narrow, like special interests, and astrology has, I want to say, always been one of my special interests. Yeah, I did my first chart for someone in 1995. I'm an old, by the way. My first year of college is when I did my first chart for a friend of mine. And so, yeah, definitely have always had a special interest in astrology, just mostly applying it to myself or doing readings for friends. And again, possibility models. I think there were so many different astrologers out there that I admired and that had written books, and they were like big, huge deals. And I thought, well, that's nice for them, and could not imagine that that could be any part of my life.
Right.
And I think I think we talked about this a little bit, but it's the pandemic, the space of the pandemic. And for some people, it allowed people to imagine a different world. And I think for some other people, they just wanted to get back to the world that they knew.
Yeah.
But for me, it allowed me to expand and imagine a different world. And so in that imagining, I thought, well, shit, this is something that I do and I want to learn more of. And what would it be like to be compensated for my special interests, compensated for the knowledge that I have been stacking up in my brain for years? Yeah, what would it be like to do this professionally? I love it. I love it. Like I have not seen a chart yet that I thought was boring. Every time I do a reading for someone, I learn something new about astrology and, not gonna lie, about myself. Oh, do you hear that?
Yeah. Is
It's
everything
the
okay?
cops. Oh yeah, it's the cops. I live in a very heavily policed community, and the cops are rude as hell. And when they're pulling someone over, they get on the loudspeaker and talk down to them. Turn right, pull over. I know you can hear me. Pull over. It's so disgusting. And also,
Freaking ego trip of it all, man.
cops are gonna cop.
Oh,
Yeah. A cab, friends, a cab. Anyway, yeah. I lost my train of thought. We were talking about the YouTube and something about it.
we're talking about
Oh no,
place
professional
where people
astrology.
pay you.
Yes. The place where people pay me. So yes, definitely you can check out vaginajenkins.com for astrology services. And also the buying of art. Like I said, I'm an artist and astrologer. And if you are not ready to go on your astrology journey, or if you just want to learn more about astrology, I run 2 blogs. One is through patreon.com. The other one is through buymeacoffee.com, and they are both under my name, Vagina Jenkins. So yeah, all of these links are in my YouTube About Me section. So yeah, definitely check them out.
So that'd be a good place to look for them.
Yes.
So I do think like mental health is a big part of this channel. I think it's one of the things we talking about.
Yes.
Well, especially like the spiritual, the juxtaposition of neurodivergency and spirituality, because I won't say every, because I'm sure that there is somebody out there who's never been diagnosed, but I don't care if you self-diagnose. If finding the title neurodivergency helps you live a better life, then who the hell am I to get in your way?
No doubt.
But it does seem like there is a particular cross-section of psychic and neurodivergent that is not just necessarily like you can be like I know people who are pagan who don't consider themselves psychics, and there's more of those that are neurotypical. But it does seem like most of the psychics I've ever worked with have a lot of the same struggles that you and I have.
Yeah. I have my own theories. I'm curious if you will.
I'll tell you my theory. Like I'll tell everybody. Like sometimes when I am trying to be deeply spiritual and I have one of my like when I get tongue tied, I tell you what, the most obnoxious symptom I deal with is the stuttering and the difficulty speaking. It's not as bad as it was when I was a kid, but like because they had me on Ritalin, which I'd love to talk about that series. But I've always kind of thought like those who walk between the worlds really fit in just one. So it's almost like there is a disconnected controller there, or like sometimes I'm like it's like driving a brand new Ferrari or a brand new mechanic that somebody spilled coffee on the board. You know, it's high class, but there's a short in it.
Yeah. Similar theories in that I was thinking about this recently. My grandma always used to quote some Bible verse. I don't exactly know what it is, but something about having to be in the world, but you don't have to be of the world. And I think that there is something there in terms of neurodiversity is only marked because of its incompatibility with capitalism, right? So that's one idea. And then this idea, and then there's this idea of being spiritually connected and how being spiritually connected often means that you have to, it's like, what are you paying attention to? Are you paying attention to this world and capitalism and patriarchy and your involvement in it? Or are you paying attention to something that's beyond? And I think in both of these cases, it is about turning away from what is directly in front of you and focusing on something beyond it. And so for me, that's the crossover between like neurodiversity and spirituality is how do you fit? How much of a good worker are you? And what are you focused on? And I don't know that people that don't fit into capitalism's vision of what a good worker is are necessarily going to be focused on trying to become a good worker. I think that we are focused on,
you know, this is something that irritates me because I honestly, neurodivergent people probably would be the best workers. We are totally capable of sacrificing ourselves, body and soul, to something if we are invested in it and if we're accommodated.
Yeah.
Like if you're willing to spend the 10 minutes to figure out, for me to explain to you, because I have learned, I know where all the creeks and the rusty pipes are up here. If they'll take the 10 minutes to sit down when something happens, because honestly, like every other person, I am midway through the breakdown before I realize it's happening. I've gotten better about it. I've learned to watch for my red flags sooner, catch the oncoming train before I get hit. But that doesn't always work out. But a lot of times if somebody will take the 10 minutes, the 10 minutes of compassion to stop me from hurting myself, for one, because that nearly happened. Not really hurting myself. Like I almost did something real petty yesterday and my counsel had to talk me down. We had protesters at our pagan pride event So I made all these little bouquets and I was going to send it to the churches with a thank you note. And they're like, no, that's antagonistic. I'm like, I mean, it's petty, but they're like, no, that's going to cause us problems. Don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
But also,
what are you talking about? But yeah, so they talked me down.
how much of it's okay. I'm with you. Just how much of being a neurodivergent person in the workplace is because people won't accommodate.
A little bit, yeah, because honestly, and it's funny because I see places where people have sort of rolled over the neurodivergency. I don't know if they're, because every neurodivergent mind is different. We all have the same, we might share struggles, but each of us is individual. And there's certain like types, like everybody who works in, like my fiance very much has, he's never been diagnosed, but you only have to have like a 10-minute conversation to see that he has some neurodivergency that hasn't been diagnosed, but he hasn't had to have it diagnosed, and he's able to excel at his job because he's hyper focused. Like he's hyper focuses on his job. It is his special interest. He has two big special interests: occultism and his work. And so he excels at both. And because of the nature of his work, he's a paramedic. Because of the structure of the job, he's able to do that job really, really well because it is go, no go. You're either chilling out at the station or you're going full bore with a distinct set, a well-oiled set of parameters, things like that, assess, these things are, that he's been trained to do. So he's great at that. Every librarian I've ever met, I won't say every librarian, but most of the librarians I have met are autistic because it's that cataloging, that need for detail, and almost there's a certain joy when you hit the right spot in your neurodivergency and you're getting something out of the thing that drives everybody else crazy. Like, just leave me alone and let me do this, and you can reach that sweet spot.
So, RE, the leave me alone part, this is what I'm talking about, because the job is rarely the job, no matter what the industry is. I mean, maybe being a paramedic is different, but I'm thinking about the neurotypical, the holistic nature of the job. How much of the job is based on how you can smile and make the right faces that make people comfortable? How much of the job is based on, oh, I know Shawnee and I go to their pool party every weekend, and we're friends outside of work. Like, that's the shit. Like, it's not that we can't do the job, it's that the job is built on holistic neurotypical expectations of what we're supposed to be in the workplace, and that's where I often see neurodivergent people fail. And so you can do a number of accommodations. Yes, I'll give you an extra time to do this task, but you're not necessarily going to get a raise or be promoted when it comes down to, that person smiles at me over coffee at the water cooler or whatever, like, that's the bullshit that I'm thinking about. Yeah.
So I had an employer, and I have never loved or loathed an employer to such great depth and equal measure to my life. And that is how I introduced this man. And his ADHD made my ADHD look neurotypical. Like, he had to use his accommodations. You could tell when he had not taken his medication. And I don't medicate. I had a really bad experience. I was a kid of the I was a part of the medication generation, so I don't take medication. So I am this is my base level. This is where I'm at. Like, I fluctuate, but I pull it together, usually using cognitive behavioral therapy or thing. How to ADHD has been a major savior. But I'm like, he said something to me. I'm like, because of the spastic nature of his ADHD, which, you know, it's one type. But because of that, he was able to get people really, really excited. He's really able to get the project started. But he's never gotten past his own ego enough to see that he is only capable of doing that part of the task.
Yeah.
If he was always just starting the task, just bringing the people together, and then was able to put somebody else in charge and hand it off, he could be, because he's the CEO of his own company, but his company is constantly crashing down. Like it goes through this like 2-year repeating cycle where where all of his employees are completely overturned in about 2 years. Even like, yeah, and it's devastating to watch because he has like all the right parts, and there is a certain amount of just trauma that occurs from not fitting in the world. You know, when you know you're different, when you know there's something wrong with you, you kind of have you've got 3 choices really. You can examine it and try to understand it and accommodate it. You can pretend it doesn't exist, or you can rail against it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think he would pretend it didn't exist, or even rail against it a little bit.
Damn, yeah.
And I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like we don't, like I'm some great guru. Good God. I can see myself doing all 3 of these at any different point, depending on what situation I'm facing at the time.
Yeah.
I've definitely.
But it's ultimately what you do most often, and what you come back to, and what you sort of train. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's not a bad word for it. Because you do.
Yeah, I'm thinking about past versions of me that were pretending. Bless her heart. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
But yeah, neurodiversity and spirituality, I definitely feel like go hand in hand. And I mean, I would be curious. I don't have like any hard theories about this, but I want to, and I consider it part of like my life's curiosity to start noticing the patterns. Um, how does ADHD show up? Are these amazing intuitives and tarot readers? I definitely see the prevalence of autistic astrologers.
Yeah,
I definitely, I definitely see that, and I definitely, yeah, and I see it in my life as well. Yeah, I want to start noticing the patterns and what the purpose of it is. I mean, neurodivergence doesn't necessarily have to have a purpose, but for my brain, it would help me if I could make sense of some patterns. I'll say that.
Yeah. So here's one to like think about later on. Something I have noticed is a lot of people who have like I can't remember the one for numbers, but dyslexia.
Oh,
if you got one of the
dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia, dyslexia, the ones where you kind of mix the letters, they seem to be drawn more towards the forms of divination that resemble like Rorschach tests, like like crystal gazing, tea leaf reading. And I've noticed, and I don't know because I had COVID, and it feels like, I don't know that it's true. People around me have not noticed it, but I feel like I have noticed it in myself, that since I had COVID, I've had more difficulty stringing a sentence together coherently, where it does seem like before that I had difficulty just saying it. But in that process, I also, like during that same time period, I really started getting into Dottie the Psychic. I started to go more professional, and I picked up the crystal ball and the tea leaves. And that's when I started really diversifying my divination practice. So I don't know which one of these happened first, but they all seem connected.
I'd be curious. Oh gosh, I have a friend who is dyslexic, I'm pretty sure. and now I want to ask them.
Yeah, well, you know, if they're not into it yet, see if they can pick it up quick.
Oh, well, the last time I talked to them, they had like 15 different tarot and oracle decks on deck that they were like consulting regularly, and I'm like, oh Jesus, how are you managing all of that information? But yeah, I would be curious where they are now with it. um hmm, hmm.
How do you well, I mean, I guess, you know, it's funny because I was kind of like, the way I kind of see it is like we're either, sometimes it's like dipping into the chaos or reaching out into the universe, but the messages are trying to filter down into this third dimensional electric meat jello. So, like,
Yeah.
there's information loss here, and then there's information loss from here to here. And so, by the time sometimes it gets to my clients, I'm like, okay, I'm going to spit a bunch of random words out at you. I want you to just keep track of them. And when we hit something that makes sense, we'll start trying to put everything together.
It's so funny. Not exactly that, but I'm kind of similar in my astrology practice. I'm like, okay, so then this is what I always tell people at the start of readings is I have some wisdom and you know your life, so you have some wisdom. So together we are going to look into this astrology thing together. I don't think that an astrology reading is something that I can give you. Like I don't think it's a product, like, but you put your hands out and I will discern, figure this all out. No, it's something that we work on together. And so, yeah, I'm quite often like, so, okay, this placement, this aspect, when I've seen this before, it usually falls down into like one of 3 or 4 different categories. Which one do you think you fall in? Okay, that makes sense, especially when it's compared to this other thing. Okay, we're working on this together.
Right.
Yeah, definitely that. Yeah.
You know what? I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much because I think we all have met that reader of whatever form their reading takes. We've seen that person who just, because you believe in what you're doing. Essentially, we all have to believe what we're doing or we would lose interest. I personally, I mean, I'm very much a person who believes in honesty and kindness. And it would be neither honest nor kind to keep doing this if I didn't believe in it because,
Yeah.
you know, there are some practical aspects like you're helping somebody figure out their life. You know, this is a service that I'm providing for people, but we've all met that reader who thinks they're authority on the universe.
I mean, how do you, well, okay, sorry. I'm going to say a thing and let me know how it lands because I'm curious about how you do your readings. I can't imagine doing a reading in a sense where I'm just like spouting information into a recorder or writing information down in a reading, like on a piece of paper and sending it over to you, because it feels very
Disconnected.
disconnected, and that I am some sort of authority about your life. Again, we're working this out together. I am not an authority about your life. It's not going to be useful for me to just put down my interpretations on paper. And I sometimes wonder if that's what people would prefer, but I don't work that way. I can't imagine working that way.
I have had to work through. I ended up accidentally creating a blockage to my own psychic ability over this very question,
Hmm.
honestly. Because, I mean, you think about it, sometimes I do think people want to treat us like some sort of party trick.
Hmm.
And I find that offensive. Honestly, like I don't think that, and I do think people sometimes will come to me almost in desperation for somebody to just tell them what to do.
Oh
I'm like,
no. Oh no.
yeah,
No,
just
no.
tell me how to fix my life. I'm like, you get a therapist.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, and I do a lot of times, I do think sometimes people will come to me instead of a therapist. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to sit here and help people work through that sort of thing. And that's kind of what I'm here for, is to help people help themselves. But no, I like, because that's one of those things that the hotline I work, I hate working the hotline. I want to build my own personal clientele because
I think I saw a video where you were saying that you were doing that, and I was wondering how that was working out because
I don't make a lot of money on that hotline right now.
It seems like you wouldn't make money, and it seems like you would burn yourself out dealing with the kind of people that would use a hotline. Tell me what to do. I got $5 a minute here. Tell me what to do. Like,
I tell you what,
babe.
honestly, that is one of those things, like, it has brought epiphanies. Sometimes just because you don't like something doesn't mean you can't learn from it. And you know, an unhappy state of mind is not necessarily something you want to waste. Because I have to eat, you know, I have to make enough money to survive. But I don't make that much money on the hotline because the structure is awful. It's literally predatory mostly towards the psychics, honestly, because I'm charging $3.99 a minute, and I'm seeing maybe $1 of that, $1.50, which is why you should always go directly towards your psychics.
I can't, yeah. And I'm curious about that person too. I don't want to shit on anybody in their financial situation, but also
it's cheaper and better to just go directly to your psychic. And that I agree with, but honestly, you can't. I think that it's unfortunate that in the psychic field, there is obviously no licensing body. Nobody can tell you that you're not tapping into the divine. So it does leave us as an industry vulnerable to vultures of every shape and size.
Yeah.
And people will look for signs of legitimacy where there are none. And people like me who do have a psychic gift, and there are a lot of really talented psychics that will only work the hotline because they can do it from home. They don't have to leave their house. They don't have to advertise. They just have to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for in life. So there's a lot of us that are burnt out from other things. And, you know, our intuition is such a part of us that we can't turn it off anyway, so we might as well get paid. This was personally a dream of mine. So keep losing where I am. Y'all, I have been this has been a week, okay? It's been more than a week. It's since the event. Like, I was doing good, I was plowing through, and I had set everything aside to do this event. And so afterwards, I had an event drop, and I am just everything, you know, I'm on the upswing, but the upswing is still symptomatic.
I hear you, and I'm with you, and I'm not judging you. And also, if anybody at home is judging you, they can eat a bag of dicks. So yeah. But look, this is what I was thinking, and I wrote it down so I didn't forget it. You were talking about, it is probably not cheaper, but more efficient maybe to go directly to a psychic instead of going through these lines. And then that connected me back to the function of neurodiversity. Okay, so a lot of the way that I think about things, because of my background in like hoodoo and ancestral veneration is so important to me. I think a lot about the ways that neurodiversity and being a spiritual person may have shown up in my ancestral line. And this goes back also to the part about spiritual people not necessarily being able to conform into new capitalist standards of work. And I very much believe that back in the day, and I'm talking about way back in the day, that there was a role for spiritual people and there was a role for neurodivergent people in society. And I think that we have gotten so far off the map with understanding that role that now neurodiversity is a disability, when I feel like in pre-colonization, it would have been a superpower, an asset. Like to have an autistic astrologer on your team or in your village, to be able to like, Oh yeah, last year when I looked at that star in the sky, the dandelions were also blooming, and that's how I knew that the winter was going to be weird. So we definitely have to make some extra grain this year. You know, putting
Right.
together all of those facts, and like to have like an ADHD person in your village, in your community, to be like, yeah, I'm going to be the first one that's going to explore this particular concept, eat this food the first, jump off the cliff the first time. I'm definitely going to be like research and development for all of these experiences and sort of that role in society as well. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, do we not fit into the world, or has the world moved beyond uh, its use or its honoring of neurodiversity? Yeah, and
I think,
spirituality.
I think you're right. Let's not pretend like this is a functioning system. They can use us. They just don't know how. Like,
Yeah,
let's not pretend like the neurotypicals are okay.
no, yeah, that part for sure.
But
But yeah,
that's actually,
when
there's a theory around that. There's a whole scientific theory around that. And actually, I got to send you this video I found. This is how long ago I watched it. I actually watched it on the History Channel one time. It was a special about shamanism, and it had followed this African village where this girl was told that she would be a spiritual leader, but her parents really wanted her to go to school. And she went to school, and she said that the spirits would befuddle the letters. I'm like, she
yeah,
ended up being a shamanist, and she went through like some intense training. And I always kind of like, I hope she's still out there. I really wish this woman well, and I really hope that she has really led her community, because like they did this ritual where she was to the village dead for 3 days and came back and had to show them a dance that she had learned from the spirits.
Damn.
I'm like, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah,
There's also, because you think about it, if like the loners, the people who are naturally night owls, you would need a certain percentage. You wouldn't need very many of them, but you would need a certain percentage of people that
yes,
are night owls, or that
yes,
are, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, if I had somebody who would take care of, if we lived in a village situation where we have one person who's taking care of this, that's their only job. They can hyperfixate on getting that done. And somebody else is going to come and do their dishes and make sure that they have clothes and tell them when it's time to take a shower and walk them through their ADLs. They could do that and excel at it, and that would be such a boon to a small group of people.
yeah.
And
that would have been a valuable role. And yeah,
right. I really think we're missing out on. I think that, when you get a village together, it's always a little bit of a powder keg for people who are different. There's this, because I'm not out in the country. It may seem like it over the I know you're out in California, so this probably seems pretty rural, but we're in the Charleston. It's sort of a city. Mm-hmm. But, West Virginia, we're kind of acutely aware of, you can be so far out that you're forgotten. So you get to know your neighbors, and you help out your neighbors, because your neighbors can be the difference between life or death. And I think that is, that neighborliness is something that I am trying to bring back into my life.
And then it's interesting to see that in this modern context, the way that you reached out to me, the way that like you're creating community outside of geography, outside of like these small little networks, like, because we have so much more now, we have so much more technology, so many more ways to connect to people. And so then how do we continue to build community with these new modern ways of doing it? And then, I know that you're doing it in real life too, with like the pagan, what is it called? Pagan Pride?
Metro Valley Pagan Pride.
Yeah, I think I just see all of the different ways. Oh, that's the ADHD, I suppose. All of these different ways in which you can accomplish the same sort of goal. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny though.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go start in a direction. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. I'm just telling up that hill.
Yeah. It warms my heart to think about ancestral patterns and the way that I fit in with ancestral patterns of like observing the world, but specifically as an astrologer, like looking at the sky. For Hoodoo Heritage Month, I was looking up, it was Nat Turner's birthday, October 2nd, 2 days ago. And so I was looking up his personal astrology chart and then the astrology chart of the Nat Turner's rebellion. It happened, it started at 2 o'clock in the morning, August 22nd, 1831. And during my research, I found out that he had been thinking about it for a long time, but started actually planning it because he saw a new moon solar eclipse. He saw a new moon solar eclipse in the sky and he took it as a sign from God. And like just that way that my people have always looked at the sky, whether people can now in modern times can like acknowledge that as a reality or not, doesn't really matter to me. But when I hear little things like that, it definitely keeps me strengthened and keeps me want to like continue my practice because I know that I am part of a lineage, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that's one of the things we wanted to talk about was a little bit more because what is Nat Turner's rebellion? I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. So like it is widely considered the it depends on who writes the history, right? It could be the most bloody and violent slave rebellion in history, or it could be the greatest and most successful slave rebellion in history. But yeah, it started in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, so like along the east coast of Virginia. Basically, it started that morning. They attacked their particular plantation owners for their freedom. And they were trying to make it to the coast to get out of this country, basically. They went on a murderous rampage through the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, depending on how you take it. But yeah, like if you think about it, like in the terms of like warfare at the time, they were like securing plantation to try and gather a mass of people to get an entire group, an entire area of land that they could defend and have some freedom and be free in that time period. And yeah, it was not a successful rebellion in that so many of the people that organized it were, killed afterwards. But it was successful in that was 1831. They started making all of these laws to like limit the freedom of Black people during that time period. You can't read, you can't be seen with a book, that kind of thing. Like it really sort of shut things down. But because people were so focused on, oh, you have to monitor your slaves, you have to monitor your enslaved folks, they were distracted from the work of like being able to like run their actual plantations. And so in 1865, when we have like the end of the Civil War and all that good stuff, there just were so many factors. It was one of those like factors that ended up being like, okay, this is a system that is not manageable. We can't do this. We can't keep an eye on this and earn money and fight the North and do all of these things. So yeah, it was successful in that way that 30 years later, we have the Emancipation Proclamation. So yeah.
I've got to learn. I got to look that up later.
That's
cool. I mean, I can definitely see where. I mean, any rebellion is, of course, going to be bloody and violent. As much as I hate to say that, like, there's only so far you can push a people before that people is going to push back.
Right. And like, if you're denying someone like their basic liberty, I don't know that they're supposed to just write you a nice letter. Could I please have some freedom? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely part of my lineage, definitely part of my legacy as a Black astrologer, as a Hoodoo-centered astrologer. And yeah, I definitely want to hold on to stories like that. And yeah, that's what this month is for me, is an opportunity to do some more research into stories like that. So that's what I'm doing next couple weeks.
That sounds really cool. We're right at an hour right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So before we end the YouTube bit and go on over to Patreon, because I want to talk more about your personal practice, and I think we were going to take apart my astral chart because I apparently love to be read in public. I tell you what, I'm one of those. I guess I'm like I have a talent as a reader, but I have a special talent in teaching other readers.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my talent is that I am a cheap novel. I'm an easy read. So let's tell everybody one more time. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Do all the YouTube stuff. Help a girl out. But tell me how people can find you, and especially your chart services. And I wish we had more time. We may have to do another one of these if you want to, because I would love to learn more about the types of astrology, because I think we very barely touched. It's funny because we've talked around it, we've talked a lot about it, but we have not really delved into the astrology itself. So
but
how can
maybe we'll talk about it for Patreon. And also maybe we'll talk about it a little bit for the Patreon. So definitely subscribe to Dottie's Patreon. But yeah, how can people find me? I'm here on YouTube at Vagina Jenkins, youtube.com, Vagina Jenkins. If you would like to book me for an astrology reading, you can check out my website, vaginajenkins.com. And I also run 2 blogs on patreon.com and buymeacoffee.com that focus on art and astrology. And you can find those, they are also under Vagina Jenkins. So yeah, everything is under my name. So look me up. And I also have a Linktree in my About Me section here on YouTube. So definitely check out that and tap in.
I'm going to try and have all that information below.
And my voice
is going out all of a sudden. Okay. So, of course, you all can find me at Dottie the Psychic.com. Look, that little jingle, it works though. People remember it.
I know.
Of course, Patreon. I quit. You all know what I'm talking about. Every YouTuber just got it English hard. So, check that out. Check her stuff out. And thank you guys for watching. And as always, safe travel and much profit to you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Shameless Self Promotion right here in Madame Tortuga's Lounge, hosted by Dottie the Psychic. If you'd like to hear more of this interview and maybe help out, support the channel or whatnot, you can totally go to Patreon.com/DOTTIE the Psychic. And if you'd like to see what other craziness I'm into, check out DOTTIE thepsychic.com. Safe travel and much profit to you.